All right, welcome back, fellow scientists. So I am recording this on Tuesday morning, right after Memorial Day weekend, and all I have to say is, man, what a teaser. Um, I'm like I like school. I don't like remote education. But but I was in full-on summer mode. I was doing my roofing for work. I was out. We were playing in the yard, planting a garden, and now, like honestly, for me, just being real. It's kind of a downer to come back and to do school. I'm sure it's a downer for you. So just hang in there. We can do this. We only have 4 class periods left, basically, and so we're just going to jump right in because there's actually a lot of things to cover. We are foraying into this idea of evolution, into the theory of evolution. And so basically, we're going to have 3 lectures and then we're going to have 1 test. So this week, today, and then the next day, whenever your day for biology is, we're gonna talk about intro to evolution. We're gonna talk about how evolution works today, and then the next day we're gonna talk about speciation. Next week, first class day, then we'll talk about evidence for evolution, and kind of hopefully wrap it up. And where does this leave us? And then the day after that, we'll have a little evolution quiz, kind of like a chapter 12 quiz, chapter 13 quiz. Same thing. It's going to be mostly multiple choice. Um, Let's see, what else did I want to say? Yeah, mostly multiple choice. Oh yeah, and that's right. Talking about tests and talking about quizzes. Hopefully today I'm going to get your test graded for DNA, RNA, protein synthesis. I'll send those out, and then you can do redos on those if you would like. Just because of the timing with the evolution quiz that you'll take next week, either Wednesday or Thursday. Sorry, either no. Next week, either Tuesday or Wednesday. Depending on that, then which day you have biology. Um, we don't have time to do corrections and for me to grade them and to get them all out to you and everything like that. So quiz over evolution is like one of the only things that you're not allowed to redo for the school year. All right, so like I said, we're gonna dive right in. And oh, by the way, um, I just want to get something out there, right in the open. I love this unit, but this unit also causes me kind of the most angst, right? Because we're a Christian school, and I do believe that God created the world not through the process, not through the means of evolution. I believe that he created it in 6 literal days, and he created it 6 to 10,000 years ago, which makes me sound absolutely scientifically ignorant, right? But that's what I believe because the Bible is my ultimate truth. Now, we're in science class, and I would not be doing a good job as a science teacher if I did not teach you about the actual theory of evolution, right? Just a spoiler alert, I'm not going to give you all these great sounding arguments against evolution. That's not what this is going to be. I teach evolution, the way that I teach evolution, as a actual literal valid scientific theory, right? Now remember, go all the way back to the beginning of the year. Scientific theory is like the atomic theory and the cell theory and the chromosomal theory of inheritance, and all that stuff, right? Evolution carries the same weight, right? All life is made of cells, right? And the world that we see around us was created through the process of evolution. Both of those are scientific statements that are the same thing. It's not like you have all this stuff over here that we're sure about and then evolution that we're not sure about. It's like no, science says that it's sure about everything. All right, so that's one reason why I teach the way I do. Second reason that I teach it the way I do is I don't want you being hamstrung, being hindered by having a Christian school education. I want you to get the same information and the same education that your public school counterparts are getting, right? And number three, a lot of people see evolution and creation as kind of like a battleground between those that believe, in God and those that don't believe in God. And a lot of people get all fired up and get all angsty about this. And there's discussion board forums. And if you watch some videos on YouTube and you look at the comments, like people get fired up about this. They see this as a battle. So I don't want to just give you fine sounding arguments, and to use, the battle analogy, I don't want to give you fine sounding arguments, and then you walk into your freshman biology class at college at a state university thinking that you have a 50 caliber machine gun and you're going to totally show your professor what's up, and everyone who believes in evolution is dumb, right? I don't want you going into it with that attitude. Because guess what? If you do that, you'll find out that you don't have a 50 caliber machine gun, you have a pea shooter, right? Because there are certain rules that science plays by, and we'll get into that. Even if you go to some place like Whitworth, right? All of the biology professors when I went to Whitworth were theistic evolutionists. Mr. Leo, what does that mean? Well, we'll get into that. We'll get into that. So suffice it to say, I'm going to teach evolution like it's a valid scientific theory because that's how science sees it, right? But we don't need to be scared about that. We don't need to be challenged by that. We don't need to have this crisis of faith because guess what? God is a revealer. God's word is the ultimate truth by which we judge all other truth claims. So you guys learn about other religions, you guys learn about other cultures, you guys learn about other worldviews. Some are Christian, some are not. Right? This is almost like a religion. This is like another culture. This is a different way to look at the world. This is looking at the world through a different worldview. We don't need to be scared of that. We can look at that worldview and then we can go back to the Bible and we can examine that worldview based on the Bible. All right, so I think it's good just to kind of remind ourselves what class we're in and what we're studying. So this is the definition of science, right? Intellectual practical activity encompassing systematic study and structure behavior of the physical and natural world, right, through observation and experiment. So, by the way, taking notes, do your best. I do want you to send in your notes just because that's another way for me to give you points, right? Notes for me, the reason why I do take notes is number one, so you can learn the stuff better because hearing it, right, you can zone out, you can check out, but if you actually write it down, then I'm hoping that you have to pay attention. Number two, it's basically like free points for you, right? So it's actually I think of it as actually kind of a favor for you, kind of a good thing for you. So please do your best to take notes. Don't watch this at double time the speed because I'm talking fast as it is already, and you're never going to keep up. But yeah, and then next week, either Tuesday or Wednesday, then I'll ask you to turn in your notes the way that you always do. All right, so this is how I always start out evolution. I ask people like at the end of the test over DNA, I ask them to look up scientific arguments against evolution. And year after year, they come back with most of the same things. And so I am prepared. I'm always prepared for that. So we're going to go over some really quickly supposed scientific arguments against evolution, and then we'll kind of summarize that for this part of the lecture. So, number one is how evolution says that we started off with really random stuff, and then we built it into more orderly or more orderliness. Right? We talked about it in chapter two, I believe it was, with entropy and with the activation energy and stuff like that. That in a closed system, things will go from order to disorder, and we use the example of your room, how it goes from order to disorder. Right? So, how can those two things be true? Well, they can be true because the Earth is not a closed system, right? Your room from time to time actually gets more orderly because you input energy. The Earth, it is possible for plants to grow and for humans to grow and to get more ordered because of the energy from this great ball of fire that we have sitting very close to us, relatively speaking, and during talking about the size of the universe, very close to us, that is constantly inputting energy. So the Earth is not a closed system. So the second law of thermodynamics, entropy always increases, works. Theory of evolution, small to complex, simple to complex, works. Next argument, where are the transitional forms? They're there. We have many transitional forms of whales. We have Tiktaalik, which was hypothetically the first land-dwelling fish, amphibian type thing with a fleshy forelimb with bones. We have Archaeopteryx, which kind of cemented the link between dinosaurs and birds. Right, birds are modern day dinosaurs. If you own chickens, you own dinosaurs. Right, so where are the missing links in the fossil record? They're there. The transitional forms, they're there. Go find them. If the theory of evolution says that monkeys turned into humans, then why aren't monkeys still turning into humans? Well, that's not actually what the theory of evolution says. Theory of evolution says that humans and the apes, the great apes, chimpanzees, gorillas, bonobos, shared a common ancestor way, way back in time. And by the way, if you can see the scale on this, shared a common ancestor about 6 million years ago, right? We'll talk about that here in a second. Um, Theory of evolution, this is a common scientific quote unquote argument against evolution. Theory of evolution says that things get better over time. my car does not get better over time. My car actually gets worse over time, and it's rusty and needs oil changes and different things like that. So a theory of evolution must be false because my car breaks down, right? Well, not really. That's not what the theory of evolution says. Theory of evolution says that populations of things change over time. So if you look at this population of cars from the 50s, and then you look at this population of cars from today, right? Some people might argue that they haven't gotten better, but whatever, they're just nostalgic, right? I mean, look at safety, look at fuel economy, look at speed, right? I mean, these cars can totally outperform these cars here. So even in cars, we see evolution. We see the population of cars changing over time. And most people would argue changing for the better. Some people would argue changing for the worse. But evolution doesn't say better or worse. Evolution just says change over time. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Again, common arguments against common scientific quote unquote arguments against evolution. Uh, Another scientific argument against evolution is how in the world could we go from chemicals to humans? Scientific argument against that, an actual scientific argument against that, would be that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Now, I know that that's hard to fathom when our national debt is in the trillions and when the number of people dead from coronavirus is approaching the hundreds of thousands, right? It's hard to, but think about it this way: if you get a check in the mail from your grandparents, would you rather have a check for $100 or would you rather have a check for $1,000? Okay, obviously, what's the difference? It's just a zero, right? 100 versus 1,000. What about 1,000 versus 10,000? Whoa, okay, now we're talking some actual money, right? Now we might actually be able to buy one of those cars from from the last slide, right? What about 10,000 versus 100,000? Right? Do you see the power of a zero? So you hear 4.5 billion years, and you're like, well, I mean, that's a long time. That's not really a long time. That is a really, really, really long time, right? Maybe this graphic will help. But if we arranged 4.5 billion years into 30 days, into the 30-day month, right, it would take a full week before we had the hypothetical origin of life, right? And then about the middle of the month, then photosynthesis, bacteria evolves, right? And then last day, then we finally have rise of mammals. And it's the last 5 seconds. If we took the whole 4.5 billion years and arranged it into a month, the last 5 seconds of the last day, we would see humans on this earth, right? So scientific argument for this or against this whole thing, how can we go from chemicals to humans, is that given enough time, anything is possible, right? And well, 4.5 billion years. Well, you got to understand the scale of the number billion, right? It's a really 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 long time, and so scientists can say, anything can happen. Chemical evolution. How in the world did we get all the stuff that's there? Well, they're actually natural processes. I would say God put them in place. Scientists would say it was the Big Bang, and the Big Bang made all the elements, right? Which is true, I think, right? Because guess who caused the Big Bang? God, right? Okay. Anyways, but even if you don't believe in God, there's this mysterious dot called singularity where all matter, space, and time and energy is compressed into an infinitesimally small thing, and then that thing explodes, and then it makes the whole entire universe, and the whole entire universe, right, then has this process of making atoms, right? So as stars burn out, then they kind of condense and they go supernova, and then they implode, and then they make all of these elements, within them. And the Miller-Urey experiment, where we have this Earth, this chunk of rock with all of these chemicals, and then you had the prehistoric atmosphere, the prehistoric ocean, and then the prehistoric atmosphere, and then you have lightning, right? Because lightning is just electricity, and then that is an input of energy. So then we can create more. I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. We can create more complex molecules, and then these complex molecules, they can go back, and then they have heat, so that's inputting energy, so then they can arrange themselves, right? So all of a sudden we've gone from nothing to atoms, and then we've gone from simple molecules, because atoms always want to combine. They want their valence shells full. That's just kind of how God made the world, right? And so then we've gone from simple atoms to complex atoms, small organic molecules. And then we've gone from small organic molecules. Now, soap does this, right? And soap is acts kind of like a phospholipid, right? It makes bubbles. So these lipids, they're just obeying their chemical properties, hydrophobic on the inside, hydrophilic on the outside. They're making little bubbles, they're making little packets, little cells. And if they happen to make a packet or a cell around this other strange molecule called DNA or RNA, then lo and behold, then there might actually be a chance that this is a cell, right? So you look at it from the big picture, you're like, how do we get from chemicals to humans? Well, I don't know, right? But you look at a small picture, it's like, well, okay, you got these, and then you got lightning, right? And then you got this, and yeah, it's a lot of chances. But guess what? We've had 4.5 billion years to think about it, or not to think about it, but for it to actually happen. Okay, so all of those are common scientific, quote unquote. I use air quotes because they're not really scientific, right? Because they're not they don't follow what the theory of evolution actually says, most of them. So I'm gonna push a little bit, and you guys can react to this for the assignment. Assignment is going to be a discussion board. All you got to do is post something on LMS. But I'm going to say that there are no valid scientific arguments against evolution, right? Evolution is just a study of the natural world, and we see life in the natural world. And if we exclude God, right, exclude the supernatural, which is the box that science puts itself in. Science only studies the natural, right? Then the only logical conclusion is evolution. So I'm gonna put it out there, right? There are no valid scientific arguments against evolution. All right, so having said that, now let's jump to our next topic. If we were in class, this would actually be another day because I love the back and forth, and you guys always have really good things to say, and it's fun, right? Like this is I actually like teaching this because this kind of gets you guys riled up, and getting you guys riled up, then that creates lots of opportunity for interactions. Like I miss seeing you guys in class, and I miss interacting, and I miss actually teaching you. But this is what it is. We gotta live in the world that God has given us. So, four different views of evolution. Go ahead and write this down. Right. So, over here, way on the left, we have atheistic evolution. Right. Atheistic, Greek and Latin roots, means no God, atheos. Right. So, this is where most scientists and professors at universities are. I like to think of it as goo to zoo to you. Right. We had the primordial soup, the chemicals, and the Miller-Urey experiment. And then we got animals. Right. And then we got us. And so, what drives this whole process? Well, random chance. Random chance drives the bus. There's no rhyme, there's no reason, there's no point to life. Basically, that's kind of the view of atheistic evolutionists. Theistic evolutionists, most Christian university professors. So I said when I went to Whitworth, all the Whitworth professors were theistic evolutionists. Some pastors are actually theistic evolutionists. My best friend in Spokane is an Anglican priest, and he would firmly put himself in this camp, in the theistic evolutionist. He did not become that way because he was a biology major. He actually became that way at seminary, and an in-depth reading and in-depth study of the Bible brought him to this view. Right. So some pastors are. Discovery Institute would be, so this is Dr. Oh, his name escapes me. He wrote Signature in the Cell. Oh, I forget. I've even heard him speak. Anyways, but Discovery Institute, Dr. Stephen Meyer, there you go. Dr. Stephen Meyer, the Discovery Institute, Signature in the Cell, all sorts of good stuff. He spoke at one of our impact events a long time ago. So that would be theistic evolutionists. It's still goo to zoo to you. The Earth is still 4.5 billion years old. The only difference is random chance doesn't drive the bus, but God drives the bus. God is driving this whole entire process, right? Next view on the continuum is young Earth creationists. This is where I would put myself. You see, I'm right here, right down here, right? This is where NWCS as a school would land, right? This is most pastors. This is most Christians, right? This is also Answers in Genesis Institute for Creation Research, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, but I'll say it anyways. I don't really appreciate these guys in their ministry. They are very combative. They are very antagonistic in their writings, in their publications. They don't understand science, and they don't do a good job of representing science, right? And it's sad to me that it's sad to me that Christians, like people who I think of as brothers and sisters in Christ, I share the same view, young Earth creationists. It's sad to me that Christians would be so antagonistic against other Christians, or other. They would just lump theistic evolution and atheistic evolution all into the same category, right? And that's not. I don't appreciate that. So as much as I hate to admit it, right, these guys are on the same bus with us, right? That they're young Earth creationists. God created in 6 literal days. The Earth is 6 to 10,000 years old. And then of course over here on the very far right of the spectrum, you have the evolution camp, which thinks that if you say if you like go up to your parents and say, "Wow, our Christmas traditions have really evolved over the years. Like we used to do this, but now we do this." Then your parents would go make you wash your mouth off with soap because evolution is evil. And there's no way that anything like you can't even like it's a evolution is like a 4 letter word. It's like a bad word. You can't even say it, right? So those are the four different views that I'd like you to write down and that I'd like you to know. And then go ahead and write down this definition. Evolution, right, is simply change over time. Or if you're a math person, right, this is a simple way to put it: change over time. That's all that evolution actually is. That's the definition of evolution, right? Is change over time. All right, so here we have our learning objectives. We're not going to get through all of these, so I'm not even going to waste time doing it, except to say that my whole goal, right, in this is not to demonize other well-meaning Christians who have a different interpretation of the Bible, right? It's not to make you combative against people who think that evolution like actually made the world that we see around us. Um, I don't I want to do a good job of teaching you evolution, um, so that you're yeah people who think that evolution is true, you don't think that they're automatically dumb. That how can they believe it? Like they're human beings. They have a rational brain, and there are actually some very very good thoughts and very good reasons why people think evolution gave us the natural world that we see today. And they're not all anti-God, right? I don't want you to be Answers in Genesis Institute for Creation Research with vitriol and poison spitting at your brothers and sisters in Christ who might have a different interpretation of the Bible than you. All right. So why should I care? Evolution is a major unifying theme in biology. I want you to leave Northwest Christian with the same education that a public school student has, even hopefully a better education than a public school student has. Evolution is a cultural conversation, right? You're gonna, no matter what you do, you'll probably get into a debate or an argument or a discussion, right? Even if you go work construction, right? As you're pounding in the nails or doing the plumbing or running the electrical or something like that, you'll have conversations with coworkers about religion, about politics, about evolution. It's just one of those things, right? And then even if you're just railing at everything that I'm saying, and you're like, how in the world are you teaching at a Christian school? Ah, I hate this. I'm going to tell my parents. Well, think about it this way: even if you want to spit vitriol and poison and like everything else at brothers and sisters in Christ who have a different worldview than you, or a different view of how God made the world than you, you need to understand what the theory of evolution says so that you can argue intelligently against something, right? So you first have to study, you first have to understand it. So even if that's your only goal, hang in there because that's a good goal. All right, here we go. So before Darwin, most people believe God created the Earth. Since creation, neither the planet nor the species have changed much. Right, 17 to 1800s, we have challenges. We have the fossil record. We have geologic time. Then we have Lamarck's theory of evolution. Right, so Lamarck's theory of evolution, classic example is the fiddler crab. Oops, come back here, little fiddler crab. So Lamarck's theory of evolution was not the first. It was before Darwin, but kind of around Darwin's time, like people were thinking about this idea of evolution. So he said that animals have an inborn urge to be complex and perfect. Animals can change their physical characteristics through use and disuse. So this fiddler crab, it has one really tiny claw and then one really big claw, right? And the way that it got that is because it's like right clawed, right? It just uses it a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot, right? Which I don't know, maybe true. Like if you use your muscles a lot, if you use one side of your body more than the other side of your body, then those muscles are going to get bigger, right? That's why you always do bicep curls, 10 or on each side, so you don't have one bicep that's huge and then one that's little thing. But anyways, so that's all good and well, right? But then he said that those acquired traits can be passed down from generation to generation. So that's like if you cut your finger off, or if you lose an arm in a horrible farming accident. That's like saying, okay, that change happened to you, and so you're going to pass that on to your children. So then when you have kids, then your child comes out like missing an arm because you lost your arm during your life. That's not how DNA works, right? It's kind of like, okay, classic example, right? How did the giraffe get the long neck? Well, it saw leaves up there that it really wanted, and so it stretched its neck. And then because it stretched its neck during its lifetime, then it had more like little giraffes like with longer necks, and then those giraffes stretched their necks, and then they had more little giraffes with longer necks. That's not how evolution actually works, right? So this is a big takeaway. I want you to make sure that you have this written down because this is wow, this is amazing. Okay, animals are not in charge of their own evolution, right? I know that you heard that evolution is animals adapting to their environment, different things like that. And so, like the husky notices that it's cold out, and so he's like, "Ooh, I have to grow thicker fur." And then somehow he thinks about it, and then poof, the thicker. That's not true. Get that out of your head right now. That's not actually what evolution says. Animals do not adapt to their environment. Animals do not adapt to their environment, right? The way that evolution works, random mutations happen. Some of those mutations are good, some of those mutations are bad. The good mutations are selected for, right? And the bad mutations are killed, right? That's how natural selection works. We'll get into that here in a second. But animals are not in charge of their own evolution. They don't think like, oh, I need to do this, and then they do it, right? That's not how it works. They do not adapt to their environment. All right, so then we have Charles Darwin, England, Anglican school, Cambridge. HMS Beagle was the famous ship that he sailed on, 5-year voyage, Galapagos Islands, finches, penguins, marine iguanas, Galapagos tortoise. If we had time in class, I would show you videos of all this flightless cormorant. Back home, he sits on his theory, then he receives a letter from someone else, basically describes what he's been thinking about for the past like 30 or 40 years, right? And so then he publishes On the Origin of Species, which is the most famous book about evolution ever written, and that's kind of the stone that starts the landslide of evolution. So here's the voyage of the Beagle. Starts in England, around South America, Galapagos Islands right here, and then back around the whole entire world, South America again, and then back up to England. Here's iguanas on South America. Here's the marine iguana on the Galapagos Islands. Galapagos Islands are the only place that we find marine iguanas. Right, here's a diagram of the Galapagos Islands and the different tortoise shells. Right, so the Galapagos tortoise, huge, like weighs like 800 pounds. Right, and its shells are different based on the different islands. Right, so here we have a low dome, here we have a medium dome, and then here we have a high back shell. Right, and Darwin noticed that and was like, "Oh, that's kind of interesting. They're so close together. Why don't the tortoises all look the same?" Right, here's tortoises on South America. It's like, oh, I see those, but how in the world did we like these are bigger, right? Here's regular cormorants from South America. Here's the flightless cormorant, only found on the Galapagos Islands, right? These small little stubby wings, not really good for anything, right? Vestigial structures, we'll talk about those later on, right? But can't fly, can't walk, can't swim, right? If you look at videos of swimming cormorants, their wings are tucked against their body and they just swim with their feet. And they're almost like otters in the way they move. It's actually kind of cool. So flightless cormorant, he saw the flightless cormorant. So here, this is the last slide. Thank you for hanging in there. I know this is a longer video. Please forgive me, but this is really important stuff, right? So Darwin's idea of natural selection. Okay, 5 statements that kind of summarize Darwin's idea of natural selection. You need to write these down. Okay, so number 1, in nature, more offspring are produced than can survive. So your maple tree up front makes more seeds than like if every single seed from every single maple tree actually turned into a full mature maple tree, like there wouldn't be any room for anything else on earth, right? So nature produces more offspring than can survive. Those offspring, because of genetics, because of sexual reproduction, right, have variations in characteristics and abilities. We talked about how pollen was actually plant sperm, and now we're at that point in the season, right, where the pollen from the pine trees, the plant sperm, is blowing and covering cars and driveways and all sorts of stuff like that. So plants, animals, right, reproduce sexually. So that leads to offspring having different characteristics, right? Different offspring with different characteristics survive and reproduce better or worse. Some plants do photosynthesis faster, some plants do photosynthesis slower, some plants store molecules and nutrients differently, other plants store molecules and nutrients better or worse, right? Um, so they'll have different characteristics and they will survive and reproduce better or worse based on that, right? And then number four, offspring with beneficial characteristics will survive and reproduce more. Therefore, the next generation will have more offspring with beneficial characteristics. The next generation might look a little bit different from the previous generation. And then 5 generations from now, it might look a little bit different than the previous generation, right? So that's natural selection. That was Darwin's greatest idea. It's actually how he didn't come up with the idea of evolution. Other people were already thinking about how things change and over time and how things evolve. He came up with a mechanism for this is how evolution works, and it's called natural selection. So if you take 1 through 4, right, that's microevolution, or in other words, it's changing within a species. So a maple tree is still a maple tree, is still a maple tree. It might be bigger, it might be taller, it might be shorter, it might be skinnier, right? Whatever the random mutations dictate and whatever is best for that environment, right? So that's all microevolution. The maple tree is still the maple tree is still the maple tree. Now, number 5 for Darwin's idea of natural selection, this is where we get into macroevolution. One species turning into 2 different species. So if this goes on long enough, if this whole process of sexual reproduction and random mutation and more offspring are produced than can survive, and they have different characteristics and they survive and reproduce differently, some better, some worse. If this goes on long enough, and 2 groups of one species are reproductively isolated from one another, and they're exposed to different environments, then we get 2 different species, right? And this is where we're going to stop because then next time we'll look at this idea of what actually is a species. How do we define a species, right? So I said that there was going to be assignment at the end of this video. So I've posted a discussion board on LMS RunWeb. Your job is to go on and to just make a comment, something you learned, something you liked, something you didn't like, a question that you have, and then respond to at least one other person's comment. So you post your own original comment, and then you respond to one other person's comment, and then you'll be done with biology for today. So this has been Mr. Leo. Hopefully, you learned a little bit about evolution, and hopefully, it's also been informative and engaging. And I will see you on the flip side. Oh, stop! Go away.